Today is January the 14th, 2021. My name is Andrew Corner, and this message is for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada. I'm going to put myself out there because I'm not kidding around anymore, sir, and I need to know that you aren't either. If you'll indulge me with a few minutes of your precious time, I have some questions. What about me, Mr. Prime Minister? Honestly, I don't know what your plan is, but I assume you must have one to put so many people's lives in danger. What do I mean? Well, sir, you are claiming that we are being locked down for our protection against the virus, right? Forgive my insolence, sir, but why this year? I have yet to see you or your party or anyone for that matter explain what specifically is so dangerous about this particular pandemic. The case fatality rate, or CFR, some people also call it the IFR for infection fatality rate. But what really we mean is, if a person is exposed to this virus, how likely is it that they're going to succumb to it? It's not significant. In fact, it's no more significant than a bad flu season. Thankfully, apparently all the flu is gone now. Forgive me for drawing this conclusion, but if people were still dying, as they always do, at this pace, which they usually do, except we said it was because of the flu, would this be over now? Could we have our lives back if that were the case? Sir, I'm very confused by all this. You see, I'm just some simpleton that doesn't have the specialized training that people who have their degrees and masters in public health management do. So please, explain this to me in terms I can comprehend. There's an old adage that says if a tree were to fall in the forest and nobody was there to hear it, would it still make a sound? I wonder, sir, is that how I can think about this? If a sickness traveled all over the world and nobody was there to constantly test for it and make wild proclamations about the danger it potentially poses, that have to this day failed to materialize, are we still in danger? It seems to me, a simple person, that the only thing that's novel about this virus is the way that people who are supposed to be doing only necessary things to protect the public are doing totally unnecessary things, so we're all scared and compliant. If we weren't being told that face masks and social distancing were designed to protect us, and we just carried on as normal, would we still be fighting with each other while our collective economies are looking at the total decimation of small businesses that were never equipped to deal with these kinds of measures? It wasn't in the business plan. Thank you if you've been following along. I have one more little scenario I'd like to throw at you. Why is the case fatality rate, which measured properly, minus the speculation, why is it the same in a country where all these measures have taken place as it is in a country where they haven't taken place? To bring it back to something I said earlier, let's say this was a nasty flu season, and none of the things that we're doing this year were being done, and it was just allowed to run amok as it had done in previous years. Wouldn't we be seeing the same unfortunate people dying from flu? I only ask because overall mortality for all causes is right on par with a nasty flu season everywhere on the planet. So what makes this year different? Do you have access to a set of data that shows that CFR is going to somehow magically rise for the first time in recorded history that a virus would be known to do that? The CFR is how we measure the deadliness of a disease. For every other disease, the CFR doesn't change dependent on what people who work for public health do to mitigate the impact. So what are we doing? And for that matter, with all the interventions that have been implemented, is there any evidence that they're working? We keep getting told that cases are going up and could explode at any time, and yet aren't most people doing the things that you say we have to do? So how does continuing to do something that appears to be having no measurable impact sensible? The only thing that seems to be happening is people's lives are being upended, which in and of itself looks like it's going to have a devastating impact on our quality of life, and already has. Every day, that impact gets compounded, and the future is looking very bleak for average Canadians like myself. Sir, I could show you this, and you can easily find this information for yourself, if you were looking for it. But it seems that having this kind of rational approach is not really something that's being advocated. But why not, sir? The WHO, who is the authority that most of our collective public health departments appear to be listening to, because most stories you read or hear tell us repeatedly that the WHO says, the WHO recommends, those guys. They came out recently with a report that said this virus was not necessarily the big one.
And I will say one thing, and I may come as a shock to people. This pandemic has been very severe. It's spread around the world extremely quickly and has affected every corner of this planet. But this is not necessarily the big one. This virus is very transmissible. And it kills people, and it has deprived so many people of loved ones. But its current case fatality is reasonably low in comparison to other emerging diseases.
This virus is very transmissible. Its current case fatality rate is reasonably low in comparison to other emerging diseases. Sir, that's where I get confused. In fact, if it's very transmissible, so it got everywhere fast, but the CFR is reasonably low, and the CFR is the same, and the overall mortality for all causes is on par with the flu, which regularly inflicts this kind of damage, along with other viruses that always kill around 2 million people every year anyways, wouldn't that mean all these measures are pointless and didn't stop the virus, like, at all? The cases you keep warning us are a sign of some great wave of destruction aren't materializing into the death rates you keep telling us that are right around the corner. But there are real consequences. So thank you for letting me get all that preamble out of the way, and let me get back to my point. The actions taken to protect us have put my plans in jeopardy. Don't you work for me? You see, sir, I had a job before all this. I was comfortable, but by no means wealthy. I was one of the typical Canadians who was living on credit, borrowing into the future because the cost of everything we needed was steadily getting more expensive. Food, property taxes, insurance, services, all going up all the time. Thankfully, I was also getting yearly raises, but still, I didn't have enough to be able to relax. So I'd been spending my time learning and trying to come up with a plan to make some extra money on the side. I attempted to exercise my rights as a formerly free Canadian when this all started. I attended a rally against masking and lockdowns, and when it was discovered that I was there, I was told that I had threatened the lives of everyone in my office. And I was told that I had to either sign a document stating as such, or I would no longer have a job. Sir, that was your doing. You made my former employers scared of their own shadow. You made them believe, with all the constant warnings and messaging and scare tactics, that somehow this year was different. But I just explained why it isn't. In fact, the WHO literally just explained that it isn't, minus the hyperbolic messaging.
But its current case fatality is reasonably low in comparison to other emerging diseases.
So I don't have a job now, because I knew all this stuff. I was paying attention, not to your bought and paid for CBC, but to actual data, numbers, cogent arguments. People that were making sense instead of spreading fear to enhance compliance. I mean, that is what you're doing, isn't it? Am I missing something? Sir, I fully admit that when you came out and gave your speech to the UN conference in September of 2020, and you said,
"We understand that right now we have to fix urgent problems, but in the long run, we also have to fix the system so that it works for everyone. To eliminate this virus anywhere, we need to eliminate it everywhere." Canada believes that a strong, coordinated response across the world and across sectors is essential. This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change.
"This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is a chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global problems like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change." I kind of freaked out a bit.
I had to jump on really quick because I am working from home today. This clip put out by Justin Trudeau to the United Nations on the 25th, I believe was Friday. Just listen to I've been harping on about this for months. This is not about a pandemic. You're going to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. This is what this is all about. He's going to tell you, listen.
Do not do enough for the most vulnerable, whether these are older persons who are dying in care homes or homeless people for whom every evening is a struggle. We are not going far enough to eliminate systemic injustice, whether this be racism against Black or Indigenous peoples, homophobia, or sexism.
Sorry, who's we? Who's we? What is all this we stuff? Okay, is this the suggestion there that we are contributing to it and only he can fix it for we? It's pretty wild presumptions there, okay? It's all nonsense. It's total nonsense. The world was not getting more racist. The world was not getting more systemically unjust. This is all nonsense. It's political pandering to people that do not know very much. I'm sorry if this appeals to you and your sense of nobility or whatever the hell it is, but this is nonsense. But it doesn't matter because he's going to tell you what this is all about.
Many countries are now on the brink of the abyss.
Because of the actions taken by public health authorities,
during
not
the
because of the
Financing
pandemic.
for Development meeting that Canada organised last spring. We must do more so that the children of the world are fed and that they can go to school. If we do not do this, the consequences will be disastrous.
Just for the record, economic growth feeds children that are hungry, not government decree.
We are facing a global humanitarian crisis. And the most worrisome part of all this is that this pandemic and the crises it has shone a spotlight on is not even the greatest threat that we face.
Even the translator stumbled over that because it's so crazy what he just said. He's admitting it's a fraud.
Our world is facing a climate reckoning. We are at this point because of our collective inability over the past decades to make the tough decisions and sacrifices needed to fight climate change and save future generations.
We are at this point because of our collective inability. This is all about low information people that do not read, they do not listen to people other than the people that they are told to listen to. And now these bureaucrats are taking over the entire goddamn world, and they're telling you why, and you still won't fucking hear it. I'm sorry. I'm pissed off.
Why? Because I already knew about the Fourth Industrial Revolution and had read Klaus Schwab's book about technological unemployment. And Agenda 2030, I knew about that. I was one of those weirdos who actually read about that stuff because understanding how we, as a planet, were supposed to tackle technological unemployment seemed way more important, way more of a front and center issue than how are we supposed to fix climate change or battle inequality or redefine gender, and how should we be allowed to speak to other people so that we don't accidentally infringe on their rights to play pretend. I was that weirdo who would ask, hey, shouldn't we be thinking about this other really important stuff instead? I was that weirdo who said, shouldn't we be spending more time in the public square talking about this massive wave of artificial intelligence coming at us? I was always amazed at people's inability to perceive real issues, like how are we going to pay off these massive debts that our collective countries are building up while sending more and more aid to people around the world instead of doing something for me and my family at home, like lowering taxes and doing something about the obscene housing bubbles the Bank of Canada was pushing along and inflating to pretend there was some kind of prosperity happening that was largely based on smoke and mirrors.
And on that note, today, I can announce that Canada will invest $400 million more in humanitarian and development funding, which will go directly to trusted partners on the ground fighting COVID-19. Our government is committed to investing even more in the years to come.
Instead of talking about that, the headlines in the news daily were focused on pointing out how everything is bad, that it's the fault of capitalism or colonialism or structural racism.
The last 6 months have laid bare fundamental gaps and inequities within our societies and between them. As with climate change, those who have the least are impacted the most. That's why last spring, Canada worked with Prime Minister Andrew Holness and Secretary General Antonio Guterres to convene a high-level meeting to discuss how leaders around the world could work together to close these gaps and build a better, more equitable system that works for everyone.
All this important stuff that comes from gender studies. It felt like the whole world around me had gone mad. But now I feel like maybe I can make some sense of it all.
This is a wake-up call. We are learning now how to do things better, how to do science better, how to do logistics better, how to do training better, how to do governance better, how to communicate better. We've developed a whole new science of infodemiology and advanced behavioral science in this way.
Is it possible, sir, that what is going on, since none of the things our public health agencies are involved in seem to actually be about public health, unless you mean you want to change the system to work for the whole world, instead of for Canadians like me, my wife, and our 2 boys, who are now going to have to live with the consequences of your decisions to prioritize people elsewhere instead of the people you work for? Us. Again, sir, in your speech you said, building back better means getting support to the most vulnerable while maintaining our momentum on reaching the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs. Sir, I've read them. I know what they are. But sir, I think most Canadians don't. If there's any group of individuals who do know what they are, I imagine, sir, they are the ones in our public health agencies who are running this whole response to the virus. They are also the ones who are tasked with helping to achieve Canada's commitments to the SDGs, are they not? Sir, do you understand what I'm saying to you? It looks like you're saying one thing about a relatively ordinary virus, with an extraordinarily harsh response for regular people and our regular lives. But it sure does help with our collective commitments from our collective governments around the world as directed and quarterbacked, that's a football reference, by the WHO, who is the partner of the UN, which is where all the recognized countries from around the entire world signed on to collectively achieve the SDGs.
Building back better means getting support to the most vulnerable while maintaining our momentum on reaching the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs.
And at the same time, the World Economic Forum, under the direction of Klaus Schwab, this year launched the Great Reset Initiative that aims to bring together its partners, which represent some of the largest corporations on the planet, who will also be the only ones left after all small businesses who weren't in on the plan and didn't know it was already being worked on, to coincide with the theoretical story they put out about life in 2030, where we would own nothing and we would be happy.
This is the plan that I have repeatedly warned about, to take the tools of oppression used to tackle the coronavirus and use them all, lockdowns, forced business closures, exclusion zones, isolation, businesses shut down, isolation at home, all of that, all of those measures, including destroying private property rights and private income in order to tackle the climate crisis.
Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system.
We have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. It is an opportunity we have never had before and may never have again. So we must use all the levers we have at our disposal, knowing that each and every one of us has a vital role to play.
We are learning now how to do things better, how to do governance better, and advance behavioral science in this way.
The Great Reset is a welcome recognition that this human tragedy must be a wake-up call. It is imperative that we reimagine, rebuild, redesign, reinvigorate, and rebalance our world. Rebalancing investment, harnessing science and technology, and advancing the transition to net zero emissions, all elements of the Great Reset, are fundamental to building the future we need.
And that last one was the clown Guterres, who was at the Climate Ambition Summit, telling us the world is going to cook by 3.5 degrees or something by the end of the century. Yeah, right. This Great Reset is as serious and as dangerous a threat to our prosperity, to your prosperity and your freedom, as we have faced in decades, with these powerful bodies, including the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and even Prince Charles boasting within a few short years, yes, their words, you will own nothing and you will be happy. They are even running ads for the Great Reset.
You said that, didn't you? This is our chance for a reset? Sir, who did you mean by our? Because it sounds to a layman like me like this entire thing has been about something else right from the start.
While the world is in need of a breakthrough, leading environmentalists warn 2020 may be our last chance to tackle climate change. Kim Jae-hee takes a look at the prospects for global climate action in 2020.
We are confronted now with the global climate crisis.
Climate change is happening, biodiversity is lost, species are disappearing.
And we must make sure that 2020 is the year of action where we bend the global emissions curve.
And that something else also comes with mandatory, unproven vaccines that have had no long-term studies and as of right now seem to have a higher CFR than the virus you're protecting us from.
14 of 17 SDGs are addressed through immunization. And when we talk about universal health coverage, we talk about primary health care, we talk about health security. Without immunization, there's none of that.
Well, not mandatory, but I'd be willing to wager that I won't be able to get a job at one of the partners of the Great Reset Initiative. That will be the only places left to work once what appears to be your goals of making everyone compliant with and unable to challenge the dictates of the SDGs that never could have or would have happened unless the people were forced into compliance, because there will literally be no means of conducting commerce without property. The funny thing about all those Great Reset partners, they're also very concerned with the problems caused by capitalism and colonialism and structural racism and all the good stuff that comes from gender studies.
Well, welcome to this extraordinary session about setting the new standards for the future of work.
Welcome to our session. Our session today focuses on accelerating racial justice in the workplace.
So, as a formerly free Canadian who has had all my freedoms to live my life as I saw fit before, but is now practically locked in my home with no clear job prospects, and for that matter, no future that seems conceivable other than the one you've already conceded that you are working towards with all your buddies at the UN, that means, apparently, I'm going to get what I get and I shouldn't get upset. Sir, who gave you that mandate? I tried very hard to maintain a level head about all this. But people think you're being honest. And the people that don't think you must be up to some kind of mass genocide because you seem to be making zero sense to anyone who has not been initiated into the politically correct new world where initiatives and conspiracies trump common sense so much that you would engage in a massive construct of your own. And the purpose seems to be to consolidate power into even smaller hands so you have more control over formerly free people. So please, sir, I only have about a month left before my settlement runs out and I can't pay my mortgage. And for what? For thinking rationally about an irrational and haphazard plan being enforced upon a seemingly unaware public at your apparent direction? So, Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Sleight of Hand, Jack in the Box, dictator, sir, I have one question left for you. What do we do now?
Canada is here to listen.
So I think from our perspective, the planet is fragile. We live in an increasingly complex global society. These threats will continue. If there's one thing we need to take from this pandemic with all of the tragedy and loss, is that we need to get our act together. We need to get ready for something that may even be more severe in future.